Hey guys, it's Jane. It's Friday and I'm back for a Friday Reads. I've just spent the last hour or so watching a whole bunch of BookTube SFF Babble videos. I'm sorry I jumped the gun. I'm not only are the time zones working against me, I knew I wasn't going to be able to film anything yesterday, and so I did it on my Wednesday and then I uploaded it once I'd finished because that's just how I do my videos. So I'm sorry I jumped the gun, everybody. It would have been nice to be in the pack. Next week, I promise, if I do it, I won't upload it until Thursday. Yeah, probably. Anyway, it's been really interesting to hear what everybody else's reactions were. One of the things I've been really quite shocked by is how many people don't like Brandon Sanderson. Obviously, there's a huge number of people who love Brandon Sanderson. That's how he always gets nominated for everything. But clearly there's a minority of folk out there who feel quite differently. So that was interesting to hear. But anyway, that's not what I'm here for today. Today I'm just going to talk about what I've been reading this week and what I'm reading at the moment. Last Friday I explained that I hadn't been well and I'd actually dropped a book halfway through and picked up a Dorothy Sayers because that's what I really wanted to read. Dorothy L is one of my favourite ever authors. She writes mystery novels. She actually has done a whole bunch of other things as well, but her bread and butter books are mystery novels. She was writing them in the golden era, so at the same time as Agatha and all that sort of stuff. But my personal opinion is that Dorothy's books are just much more enjoyable literature than most of her mystery contemporaries because they're actually interesting character studies as well as mysteries. So her hero of most of her mystery stories is Lord Peter Wimsey. These books are set contemporary to when she was writing them. So the early ones are between the wars. So the Jeeves and Wooster books are set in that period as well. White House kept writing that period even after that period had well and truly gone. But Dorothy Sayers' book, her later books are actually set later on. But anyway, it's set in this golden period between the wars where society in Britain was really in flux, and so there's lots of stuff about class that goes on in these books. Peter Wimsey, who's our gentleman sleuth at the heart of the stories, is the second son of a duke. His father, the Duke, died, and so now he's the brother of the Duke of Denver. His mother is the Dowager Duchess, and we meet his mother in the first book, and she's gorgeous, and I love the Dowager Duchess always in the books. We also meet his brother, the Duke, I think briefly in the first book, but we really get to meet him in the second book because he's one of the main characters in the second book. He's dull and boring. It's this classic sort of, he's a staid Englishman and his wife is terrible. She's a horrible piece of work. So that's the family. We also have, apart from Lord Peter, who's wonderful and he's terribly bright and charming, and who often puts on a bit of a buffoon act. So he sounds much more stupid than he actually is, which sounds to me like not a bad way to go about things if you're going to be a gentleman sleuth. We have Bunter, Peter's servant. I'm not sure if they call him a valet or what his actual title is, but they met during the war. Bunter was sergeant to Peter's officer during the First World War, and that's again, that's a classic trope from literature of this period. And the other really main character is Detective Inspector Parker, who is sort of the middle class person. So we have an upper class, high status idiot, Lord Peter Wimsey, who's not actually an idiot. We have Parker, the middle class working man. We have Bunter, the manservant, and between the three of them, and three of them are actually quite vibrant characters in the stories. There's a whole bunch of stuff that gets worked through about class. Anyway, The mysteries. The first one, I actually didn't stop at the first one. I ended up reading the first 3 because that's what I wanted to do. So the first one is called Whose Body? It's not the greatest mystery novel of all time, but I actually think it still stands up. It's a satisfying story. There are 2 crimes that have occurred, and initially they don't seem to be connected, but yeah, as time goes on. So we've got one person who's missing and an unknown body who has turned up. And of course, initially there's a question mark whether this body is for the person, but then it's obviously not of the person, but we still have like one body missing for one crime and one body present for another crime. That's what's going on in Whose Body. The second one, Clouds of Witnesses, Peter's brother, the Duke, has got himself in a bit of trouble. The story opens, Peter and Bunter are off in Corsica having a holiday after wrapping up the mystery from the first book. And he comes out from the wilds after a month away with, not answering letters or getting newspapers or whatever, and gets to Paris to discover on the front page of the newspaper that his brother is being arraigned for murder. So has to rush back to save the day. That is a really classic sort of country house murder mystery where there's all these things that went on in one night and everybody's alibis clash and everybody's stories clash, and there's obviously a whole bunch of stuff that's going on, and Denver won't actually tell anybody what he was doing because I think there's a lady involved, and he couldn't sully her name. And anyway, so that's a good one. The third one is the point at which I think Dorothy Sayers and Peter Wimsey is really hitting his stride. That's called Unnatural Death. That's a cracker of a mystery story. I really enjoyed all 3 of these, as you can tell, and I could talk about them indefinitely, but I'm going to stop there. After I finished those 3 Peter Wimseys, I thought, okay, I'm actually feeling a bit better. I'm going to go back and pick up the Nancy Kress, which I dropped halfway through last week. This is actually a really interesting science fiction story. I've been thinking about it all morning, how I'm going to actually talk about it, because there's a twist that happens at about the 40% mark or something, and I don't feel like I can actually tell you what happens because it's far enough in that it's a spoiler. But the problem is that everything else that happens after that is dependent on what happens at this event. So I can really only tell you the opening of it, which is that it's set in the near future, or the near future at the time when the book was written, because it's a few years old now, this story. And aliens have arrived, and they announce their presence in a fairly strange way. And anyway, this alien race, who's calling themselves the Atoners, announced to the human race that they have actually visited Earth before. They visited some thousands of years previously. And at that time, they took some people from the planet and have taken them elsewhere, like they kidnapped some early humans, that they did something at the time, which is either this kidnap or something as a corollary to the kidnap. We're not 100% certain because they don't actually explain what it was, but they did something that they now regret. And that's why they're calling themselves the Atoners. They have come back to try and make amends in some sense. And what they are wanting from humanity is they're wanting some human beings to volunteer to come and be witnesses for them. So the Atoners have set up a base on the moon, and they are going to select some humans, take them to the moon, and then from there off to these places where there are now civilizations based on the humans who were transferred from Earth in the past. And these witnesses are going to see what happened. It's a really interesting premise, and it's unlike anything else I've ever read. The second half of the story is all about what happens after the witnessing. So the witnesses are back on Earth. It's all about how different people in the world deal with, cope with, integrate into their worldview, or in fact fail to integrate into their worldview in certain cases, the information, this new information that's come back from the witnesses. I found it a really interesting story. I never quite knew exactly where it was going to land, where it was going to end up. I found it satisfying, even though I felt like the ending was still a bit open. And I would love to talk with anybody who's read this, because I thought this was a really interesting story, but it's difficult to talk about without spoilers. So that was Nancy Kress's Steal Across the Sky. I can highly recommend anybody who likes a bit of a thought-provoking SF read. It was a good one. After I finished Nancy Kress, I should have picked up a Secret History of Seven Killings, but I didn't, because I went to the library and I thought, look, I'm just going to check and see if they've got any of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Awards shortlist books just there for me to take. And it turned out Carry On was there, the Rainbow Rowell YA book. It was just there, it was waiting to be borrowed, and I thought, okay, because that's one of the ones that the read-alongs are going on right now. I thought, okay, we'll do this. So I've started this. I'm about 40% of the way through Carry On. I have some complicated thoughts about that, but this video has gone too long now, so I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to write some comments on the Goodreads discussion group, and then next week after I finish it, I will hopefully have some more formed thoughts. That's it for me today. I hope you're all well, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!